What's going on, everybody? So today we have our Whirlwind Thorns Barbarian build. Now I'm really excited about this one. Keep in mind this is a leveling build, as I've shared on all of my build videos. This is 1 to 50, which means that we are focused on a couple of things: single target damage if we can get it, as well as mobility. Both those things are going to really ramp up our ability to kind of clear content and get to those early campaign levels. Now, Whirlwind specifically was a skill that I found to be a little bit lackluster in a lot of scenarios until you get access to additional parts of the skill tree, when it really ramps up. And even at the end of the initial beta, level 25, I could really get a ton of use out of Whirlwind. So the early levels are going to be a little bit harder. Compared to like the Rogue and Sorcerer, Barbarian does just have a naturally harder leveling process, but this should really start to ramp up around that level 15 mark into the later 20s. And then as soon as you hit that, your stride, you're going to be absolutely crushing everything. Let's dive into the skills. As for the people that may not want to listen to a whole video, I will leave a link to this build and my spreadsheet down below. For those of you that are curious, this is what it looks like. I have all the different builds that I've gone over on the channel in different levelings, so you guys can see where I've kind of put the points at what point. First off, though, we are going to be running a Thorns Whirlwind plus a little bit of bleed here. So we're going to be running Leap, Challenging Shout, War Cry, Rallying Cry, Lunging Strike, and Whirlwind. In terms of skills, we're going to start off with Lunging Strike, 2 points to that in order to unlock Whirlwind. Lunging Strike is really good on Barbarians because it's kind of awkward to sort of dash or hit someone without a little bit of a dash, and Lunging Strike just makes that super clean, super easy. And later on, we actually have additional bleeding, which will work really well with our traits later on. After we get 2 points into Lunging Strike, we're going to pick up Whirlwind, go Enhanced Whirlwind, which is going to give us extra Fury generation, which allow us to Whirlwind more, and then Furious Whirlwind. Now, you might notice something. We're actually running a little bit of a bleed build here in combination with Thorns and Whirlwind, and this really works well with our key passive that we're going to talk about later on, and a couple of other passives. This is really strong in terms of just adding additional damage and a lot of additional effects in general on this Whirlwind. It also doesn't make us so that we have to keep our Whirlwind channeled with Violent Whirlwind, which means that you can kind of just tap Whirlwind when you need to, and then that'll be totally fine. Although there is an advantage to keeping Whirlwind up, as we'll see later on in this build. After we've picked up some points into Whirlwind, or at least a couple points into Whirlwind, and then Enhanced Whirlwind, Furious Whirlwind, we're going to put a second point into Whirlwind, dive down into Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry, this is a key skill just to give us extra movement speed, but also later on when we pick up Enhanced Rallying Cry for Unstoppable. Unstoppable is a key skill, or passive I should say, that is going to activate whenever we activate Rallying Cry, and that's going to make us break CC, which is crucial in every build, at least one source of it. But also the resource generation on Rallying Cry is incredibly important for us to actually build up stacks of our Whirlwind or Fury so we can Whirlwind at least relatively often. After we picked up Rallying Cry, the first point, we're going to come back and max out Whirlwind. Then we're going to go up for Battle Lunging Strike for that bleed. And then we're going to come down for Leap and War Cry. War Cry is really powerful for the boss fights because we're just going to get a straight up 21% damage increase. And as we see from our Enhanced War Cry later on, this is another 25% damage increase because of Berserking, which is really powerful. Not only that, Leap, just additional mobility throughout the map. It's really important because this can actually leap over areas of terrain sometimes, which is way different from a lot of other mobility skills like in the Rogue. You know, your dash doesn't leap over abilities or terrain, things like that. So Leap is actually really powerful for that reason. After we picked up those two skills, we're going to pick up that Enhanced War Cry. After we go War Cry, Leap into Enhanced War Cry, then we're going to pick up Outburst. Now, Outburst is really important for just general clearing of dungeons. This is not meant to kill bosses. This is kind of in addition to kill ads while we're running through. It's going to make it really clean so we can just Whirlwind through ads and then kill them off with our Thorns. It's super powerful. And it does actually do very good damage with bosses, even though it's not meant for that. It does do good damage against bosses with the addition of Challenging Shout, which we'll pick up later on. So Outburst in a Tough as Nails, this is just going to increase our Thorns, and when they hit us, they're going to take additional 10% of our Thorns as bleeding damage, which again is going to work with our passives later on. Challenging Shout is the next pickup. We want to pick up Thorns first because the reason we're picking up Challenging Shout is not only for the damage reduction, which is very good, but also for the enhanced Challenging Shout to increase our maximum life, which again, we're going to get additional Thorns, and then Strategic Challenging Shout, which is going to give us a massive amount of Thorns equal to 30% of our maximum life. And since we've gotten Challenging Shout, Rallying Cry, and War Cry, we got to pick up Booming Voice for additional 24% duration on all of those skills. After that, here's where it gets really interesting. And this is where I would say the build really starts to show its true colors and starts to get insanely strong. So we're going to pick up Heavy-Handed ×3. When we're using two-handed weapons, we're going to deal 15% increased critical strike damage. This is really, really powerful because at level 35, we're going to pick up Gushing Wounds. When we cause an enemy to bleed, we have a chance equal to critical strike chance to increase the build amount by 100% of our critical strike damage bonus. This is really, really powerful because, again, we have a chance anytime someone hits us with a basic because of Thorns, we have a chance whenever we hit with a bleed, a basic, any sort of bleeding in our build has a chance to essentially crit, which makes the crit damage increasing and the aspects that we'll talk about later on really, really powerful. Gushing Wounds is insanely, insanely powerful with any sort of bleed build, and if you happen to have any sort of overpower hit, it's going to increase the damage even more. After we picked up Gushing Wounds, we're going to come back up for Imposing Presence, which is going to give us extra maximum life for additional Thorns. Then we pick up 1 point into Raid Leader. This is really, really nice as we start to approach that level 50 because we will start to take a little bit more damage, assuming that the bosses and monsters get harder. As with the betas and anything like that, as we level up, we tend to get a little bit weaker, so Raid Leader is going to help us out with additional healing. Then we pick up 3-point Swiftness. I really, really like additional movement speed in this build in general, but it's kind of hard to get the points here early on because we really want to focus on just developing our damage and just ability to crush bosses. But now is a good point to pick up 3 points into Swiftness so that we can actually just move quicker, which the Barbarian doesn't have too many movement skills, so this is really, really nice. After that, we're going to go ahead and pick up Rallying Cry maxed out so we can get additional resource generation. This is really, really powerful, again, with our ability to kind of keep up our Whirlwind. And lastly, we're going to max out War Cry for additional damage dealt before those bosses. This is a really, really powerful build. When we consider the aspects that we're going to get, keep in mind that these aspects are only from the Codex of Power. So because we are a Barbarian, we have a lot of additional aspects to equip because we have so many different weapons. Now, it's important to note with this build, the expertise here, I really, really think that the two-handed expertise, because we're going to get additional bleeding damage when we kill an enemy. This also allows us to use a two-handed sword, which means that our slashing weapon, our two-handed slashing weapon, is the weapon that we're going to be focusing in on, because that's where our damage from our abilities are going to come from. And so any other weapon here can just be applied an aspect, which means that we're going to be running a few aspects here. Aspect of the Dire Whirlwind. This is where it gets really, really crazy with our initial skills or traits that we put into later on into the build. We get additional crit strike chance, and since we actually get a 5% each second because we have the lowest versions, this is a Codex of Power, we get a 100% increase on that, which is 10%, which is 40% crit strike chance every second it's channeled. And with another aspect here, we're going to be able to channel it for 4 seconds, no problem, most likely. And this means that with that 40% crit strike chance, if we remember, we're getting extra potential to crit damage on our bleeds. So our bleeds are going to be critting essentially, which is absolutely insane. Okay, absolutely insane. After that, we're going to pick up an aspect of Ancestral Echoes. This is really, really good as well because anytime we lucky hit, and if we look at Whirlwind's lucky hit chance, we can see that it is 25%. So anytime we're hitting, we have a 1 in 4 chance to basically summon an additional character that will Whirlwind for us, which is really, really good as well. Edgemaster's aspect, this is going to go on our amulet, so we can actually get our 50% increase on this one because this is arguably the second most important one. It's just going to give us basically 15% extra damage on our Whirlwind if we have full primary resource. And again, since we have massive crit rate bonuses, this crit or this extra damage is going to scale with our crit rate, with our crit damage, with our bleeding. It's really, really powerful. Then we have aspect of the Expectant, which is going to basically allow us to get extra core skill damage. This is really, really good as well because the Barbarian needs to basic in order to generate Fury, generally speaking, although we have a couple of ways around that in this build. So we're going to be basicing a good amount, especially since we kind of want to basic to leap around to opponents. And I really like the aspect of expectant in this slot. And lastly, this is arguably the most important one in addition to the Dire Whirlwind one. So if I can only pick 2 on this board to immediately get, it's going to be the Dire Whirlwind into the Echoing Fury. Now this gives us extra fury per second whenever we have our shout skills active. So to give you an idea, if we have 3 shout skills active, we're gonna get 6 fury per second, which is going to allow us to generate a lot of fury per second, in addition to the fury generators that we already have, things like leap, things like rallying cry. And because we have 56% increased resource generation from our rallying cry, guess what? This is now gonna become, instead of 6, 9 point something, roughly around 10 fury per second, which is really, really good. So, and of course, if we have the enhanced, actually, this is actually 76%, so it's even further than I initially stated, probably around like 12 fury per second, which is just absolutely crazy. Actually, not quite 12, it's about like what, 10 or 11 fury per second. Not great on the math right now, but we're going to be getting a ton of fury from the aspect of Echoing Fury, as well as the Rallying Cry here, which is really, really powerful. Now let's really quickly talk a couple of stats that you might want to consider. Damage with bleeding. This is really, really good because most of our damage is bleeding. Damage with core is going to be super, super powerful as well, because we're going to be trying to crit with our Whirlwind, which is going to increase our bleed damage, and that therefore is going to massively ramp up with damage with core because we're going to be critting quite often. Thorns, this is really, really important to acquire on your armor pieces. Now normally there's a lot of characters that can only really get a ton of stats from their weapons, but barbs are a little bit different in that a lot of your gear pieces can really contribute to your build, like your jewelry, your gems. Thorns is super, super nice to acquire just to kind of smooth out the build and give us a little bit passive damage across the board. And then lastly, just increasing our critical strike chance and damage is going to be very, very, very conducive to just additional bleed damage and just absolutely blast everything. Now, of course, you can run all sorts of different skills. You can run different stats. You can run different key passives, all that different stuff, or even additional aspects, but this is going to give you a really, really nice start for a amazing leveling build until you reach level 20 to 30, and that's when it starts to ramp up to insane proportions, especially when we get through those early levels of the campaign or early levels in general, just so we can get our aspects. And once we get our aspects, the build completely changes. This is one thing that we were not able to get during the betas. For example, the aspect of Echoing Fury, we weren't able to get the aspect of Expectant, really guaranteed. The Edgemasters aspect wasn't guaranteed, Ancestral Echoes wasn't guaranteed, and the Dire Whirlwind wasn't guaranteed. And all of these things are so, so powerful, especially the aspect of Dire Whirlwind. This is something that getting 40 potential % of crit strike chance just breaks a lot of builds in general when we're talking about ARPGs. So this is going to be key for the build. Hopefully you enjoyed, everyone. I know that oftentimes Whirlwind is a fan favorite, so hopefully this satisfies that need. I oftentimes mix a lot of things together with this Barb build because Barb is one of those classes that honestly, you kind of innately go into Thorns oftentimes just because those are the best passives to run. On top of that, Bleed is a very, very powerful aspect with Barbarian with the expertise. One thing I want to mention here is that I didn't really talk about the expertise system too much or the technique, and that is because we don't really have too much information on the techniques in the game yet, and once that comes out, then perhaps we will have a little bit more guidance. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.